Good morning, everyone, and welcome back for another stream. It is Tuesday. I had to think about that one. It's the 12th of January, and it is about 10 past 1, because I'm a little bit behind today, and yet also not, because there is no schedule. I had a very, very bad night's sleep, so I slept in through the morning to make up the sleep that I didn't get. And then I sat on my landing crying for a while, because it's good crying. I understand that a lot of crying occurs here. That's part of the brand. I got a really lovely package from my work team. If you don't know, I worked for an online game until the end of last month, and I had to leave to focus on looking after myself and my health, and they sent me this amazing huge package of things for me, and it was completely out of the blue. My husband produced this strange package for me, and then I just sat on the landing and opened it and cried. So that was a lovely but unexpected start to today. And then I've been getting some other little bits of admin done. I've saved my Excuse me if you heard that from my throat. I've saved myself some easier tasks for this afternoon because I had trouble yesterday. So I did really well yesterday compared to how I've done in the past few weeks. Because I did the stream, which was 2 hours, and we typed up all those notes and got my PhD notebook completely typed up. I've now made more notes, so we've no longer got my PhD notebook completely typed up, but almost ahead of the curve. So I did that. I had the break I talked about. I didn't find as much diamond in Minecraft as I'd wanted to. But then I went to do some reading, and I was just really struggling with focusing. I did get 50 pages read in the end, and that's of this book, which is Sunbathing in the Rain, which my webcam is cooperating with showing you today. And I'm going to be reading some more of that on stream today, because I've got a new setup. I've got an extra camera, so you'll be able to see me doing some reading. I was trying to work out a way to do reading on stream, because so much of the work I have to do is reading. I can't just type notes up forever. So I've got that to show you in a bit. But yeah, so I got like 45 minutes in, and 50 pages and 45 minutes is slow for me, even taking notes as I'm reading. And I got to the point where I was just like, okay, I need to stop. And as soon as I stopped, I got so I've started to describe it as being grief punched. Because since Grandad died, obviously in the first few months it was much more intense, but the further we get from it, the more random the effects of grief are upon me. And I'll be completely fine one moment, and the next moment it's like I've had a sucker punch to the chest, with all of the grief. So that happened. So I then went into looking after myself mode for the rest of the day. But I still did loads, and I'm still really pleased with that. So what I'm doing today is I'm putting the reading up front and doing that first. I'm not going to type any notes up today. I'm going to give myself a break from that. And I'm going to do some reading, and I'm kind of hoping we can finish this book. I've got like 130 pages left, which I think I can do in a couple of hours, assuming I don't get distracted and talk too much. But even if I just get another 50 done, that'll be great, because I'll be continuing to work through it. And then I finally got some emails from university with stuff that I need to register for and sign up for, and things there's loads of training for research students that I want to go and do, and stuff like that I've left that for my afternoon block of studying, so that I can have something a bit easier to do today. And give myself a slightly gentler day. That's the plan anyway. So we'll see how that goes. I also wanted to mention, and I talked about this on last Thursday a little bit when I was talking about the atrocities that happened in America last week and acknowledging them and making it clear what is and isn't okay here. But I want to mention as well that the fact that I'm able to talk about other things and think about other things is a position of privilege. It's not just because I'm in the UK, because we're moving towards that sort of thing happening in the UK as well. Like, we've got all the problems that America have. They're just further along the path than we are. And I genuinely believe that. And I've believed that for a long time. And yeah, the fact that I'm able to come here and work and study and stream and be even remotely coherent is a position of privilege, and I want to acknowledge that. And I hope that this can be somewhere. I hope that I can use that position of privilege to give a space that is distracting, interesting, allows your mind to engage with something else, whatever that may be. So, yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about? When I was unable to sleep last night, I was mentally going through all of the things I wanted to talk about, and I can't remember any of them now. Which seems about right. I always lie there going, maybe I should write these things down. I might forget them in the morning. And then I go, no, that is just the voice of doubt creeping in. It will be fine. I don't need to do that. I'll remember it tomorrow. And I don't know what it was. So I don't know, maybe I should start having there's too much stuff on my bedside table anyway because of all my medication, but maybe I should have a notebook there where I can just roll over and be like, this thing. But okay, so I'm just looking at Notion as well. I realised also that I haven't moved this book into doing since I started doing it. I've got to find where it is. Where is it? Did I not add it? Because this book was in the other room, so I didn't add it at all. Unless I'm just missing it. No, I'm not. So I'll put it in my doing column. But yeah, let's go over to pull the right things back up on my screen. And hopefully this works okay and my computer doesn't get upset. I know running 2 webcams at once is a bit of a strain. Look, it's me. So basically I've got a webcam on a microphone stand above my desk. I know it's wonky. I'm so sorry. I tried. So my desk is in the corner of this very small room. And I can't get the microphone arm anywhere else. I have some ability to adjust this, but for now, this is the best I can manage. But I think it's cool. You can see my terrible handwriting. But basically, I wanted a way to show you all of the work I'm doing. I'm gonna get a lot more paranoid about making sure that my nails are done now. But yeah, so basically my plan is just to do some reading. Now I will say, obviously, it's important to acknowledge that it's not okay to just show you entire books on stream. However, I have looked at this on full screen and you can't clearly read it. So I believe it's okay. But it means that I won't be improving the quality of this, because I don't feel like it's right to. Yeah, this is not my book. Well, it's my book, but you know what I mean. It's not my intellectual property. So in the same way that it would be inappropriate to read you the entire book, I also don't want to show you the entire book in video. But I believe that it's blurry enough, effectively, that it should be fine. I'll keep reviewing that and making sure that it's okay, because it's a thing that, as a person who has published books, I consider important. I'd be very happy for people to do this with my books, but like giving away the whole text, as it were, less so. So yeah, I'm gonna do some reading. What I'm also gonna do is I'm actually gonna time it today, because I want to make sure that I do take some breaks. And the nice thing is you can see this. Look. Although that is directly under... it might be quite loud when it goes off. But yeah, so this way you'll be able to actually see me working. When I was reading yesterday, I was doing it in bed. And it's kind of... it's good and it's not good at the same time. Like, it's helpful in terms of my physical comfort, but it does make me feel even tireder. And yeah, I just don't have like the same like working energy. But anyway, I started that timer, so I should read. This is a bit weird. I'll have to get used to it. So one thing you can see is the thing I was talking about this book being written in short fragments. So this is one whole section, this page. They're all different. They're not all that length, but they're like different lengths. But that's like one example. That's got the reflection of all the lights in it. I don't think I'm going to be able to avoid that, unfortunately. So I've got a light directly above my head, so there's not much I can do about that. Time is going really fast. This book made me angry yesterday when I was reading it. So there's a perspective that she takes that depression occurs not just because of things like genetic predisposition or that sort of thing, but that depression occurs because it is a necessary force of change in your life. What was the bit from yesterday? Yeah, so this is the quote that made me really angry. I'm so angry that my notes include me trying to process. You can just see where it says I am angry. And the quote is, "The last thing you should do is waste your depression. Please don't let all your suffering go to waste." And what I've written is, I'm angry reading this. Why am I angry? It's treading a fine line around suffering. The idea that you must suffer to be more. But I don't think she's saying that. She's just boldly saying that she's a better person for the depression, which is something that I've said before. But it's really hard to read. And I've just read this line of people who are depressed have stopped lying to themselves, when in fact that a lot of the intrusive thoughts that I have and that I know other people have related to depression are lies. So it's a really weird, like the idea that you are worthless and without worth is a really common thought to have when you're depressed, and it's wrong. So I'm uncomfortable with the idea of saying that depression is a form of truth. Or I think it's okay to say that it has truth within it, but she's very binary with it and saying no, the depression is almost the ultimate truth. And I think it's good. I think it's good to have primary sources that I don't like. I think that's important. Because it's made me like think about and like I do believe that my mental illness has been has had positive effects on my life. I believe that there's aspects of the person that I am now that are only the case because of the things that I've been through and continue to go through. So clearly, to an extent, I agree with her. But then I'm also being made so uncomfortable by it. It's really interesting that there's that contradiction. Hey Shay. All right, I'm going to try and actually read for these last 5 minutes. I've also realised that I think the chat is going to go over my face. No, I'll look at that afterwards. It's fine. I can sort it out. Yeah, this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. There's a passage here. Depression happens to people who won't listen to the messages which their subconscious is sending them. Severe depression happens to those so willful that they ignore whatever goes contrary to their conscious desires. If I had listened to myself sooner, I wouldn't have needed to get depressed. Because I don't think it's completely wrong, but there's also something wrong about it. I'm just going to write, what's this, 117? And the other thing is, like, because I'm thinking about, like, truth is a really interesting theme to have running through this book, because it's a theme that is then going to run through my research. And it's interesting thinking about the truth of an individual's experience when they're making blanket statements about a condition. And that's, yeah, there's something in there that I think is, like, you know, meaty. Move this forward a bit. Yeah, it is partially pointing to intuition. I think basically what it's saying is, like, it's a bit like burnout, I think, is what she's sort of talking about, is if you run yourself into the ground, then you're then going to burn out, and burnout is often very similar to depression, and in many cases it does manifest as depression. And I think it's the idea that if you'd used that intuition earlier on and gotten out of whatever it was that was causing you to burn out or head towards depression in this case, then it wouldn't have happened. But it's a very... I think I'm just uncomfortable with very blanket statements about a condition that is so different for everyone. Obviously, there's commonalities. But then I also find myself making blanket statements like that as well. So it's, yeah. I don't know what my thoughts are yet. I have a lot of thoughts, but they're not like, they're kind of wispy at the moment. It seems the author wrote everything out from their own experience of pain just to vent out. So the really interesting thing about this book, so this book is written from a place of remission, but with the intent of writing it for a person who is in the midst of severe depression. She talks about that at the beginning of the book. It's one of the reasons it's written in like shorter chunks, shorter passages. I think you can see, maybe that previous page was better. Yeah, like this is like a little chunk, and then there's a quote, and then there's another chunk here. Because she talked at the beginning about how it can be hard to digest like large amounts of text in the midst of depression. But it's interesting hearing her. She talks about emotion, but she talks about it in a very removed way. And I think I've definitely done that at points where I've been writing about my experiences that I've not been able in my writing to fully connect with the emotion of that. So she's a poet, and I'm really interested now to look at her poetry and if she's written poetry about her depression, and to compare that to her memoir writing, and to see what the difference is, what she manages to tap into in one form and not in others, because I think that's a really good point of contrast. That's a really good idea, actually. I'm going to write that down. Because yeah, there definitely feels like an element of how this book isn't venting, actually, that it's a recounting rather than a venting. Because it's lacking that like emotional connection in there. Which is especially interesting given that she's clearly thought about the format of her writing and what it's doing. Surprising memoir. Probably take more of a break now. I was about to start again. And then I was like, Yeah, human emotion is really complex, and I think especially when you bring mental illness into the equation, it can become very hard to accurately interpret your own emotions. So, for example, in the case of any illness characterized by anxiety, and I say that vaguely because I don't just mean anxiety disorders, I include things like OCD and anything where, and PTSD, anything where anxiety is a symptom. Um, it can be really hard to distinguish anxiety symptoms from excitement because they're very similar, right? Like when you're excited about something, you're like on edge and tense and maybe like slightly breathless, and they're all things that you have when you're anxious. So it's interesting to try and tease out one from the other at a point when you can't. Um, yeah, I think that's happened to the music because the music stopped. We ran out of music. Well, it looks like we did. We did run out of music. There we go. That's better. Yeah, that should be enough for a while. It's super interesting, and it's. I was talking a bit about this yesterday, but I'm trying to get more comfortable with not knowing things, and it's much easier to get comfortable with not knowing things when, as I'm reading, I'm getting excited about chasing down those ideas. And that's a lovely experience to have because it's effectively being excited by the fact that I don't know something. I played a roleplay character based on this once. And like I really enjoyed it. Just the idea of a sort of scholar who's just interested in anything that they don't know and excited by the fact that you can't know everything. Hey Neil, how are you today? I apologise, by the way, if you can see any of the cat hair on my desk, because it's yeah, it's a thing. It's everywhere. You'd think with a predominantly white cat that a white desk would be okay. Nope, she's also black and orange. Better than yesterday. Oh, that's good to hear. I'm all right today. I slept very badly, but then I was able, fortunately, to sleep through more of the morning to make up for it. Not like continuously, but enough that I don't feel completely rough now. Welcome to the new setup where I can show you my reading. All right, let's do another burst. I'm sorry this flickers, by the way. I think it's just the something about the camera doesn't like it. Yeah, I'm not muting or anything whilst I'm reading, so feel free to continue to talk to me. This is really so that I don't read too much in one go, rather than because I need to completely focus for these 20 minutes. Oh, and also for anyone who's coming in, I know this is blurry. That's deliberate. This book isn't my intellectual property, so I don't feel comfortable showing you it like fully and clearly, which is why it's a little bit fuzzy. That is both on purpose and also because this webcam's a bit older. I might actually even blur it a bit more in the future. I think it's okay now because you can't really read it. But you sort of can, but it's really hard to. So we'll see. Damn it, I just said I wasn't super tired. Because I mentioned it. I mentioned sleep. My body got excited. It's just because my brain needs more oxygen to receive more information. Yes. I'm just going to move the camera very. This might hopefully stop it shaking less whilst I'm writing. It won't be leaning directly against the desk. Who knows though? It's really interesting that whilst I'm reading, I have this instinct slash tendency to skip quotes. Like, I sort of read them much more shallowly, even though they've clearly been included for a reason, and thoughtfully. But I always have this moment where I'm like, need to read this? Like, is this relevant? But it's different in this book because that normally, like, when you get like an indented quote like this, it's often like at the start of a chapter or, you know, the start of a section of the book or that sort of thing. Whereas they're all contained within this and they're part of like the metaphors that she's playing with. And it's, I wanted, actually, I probably should have written down that bit from a few pages ago. What was it? This is going to annoy me because they're going to be out of order. 118 to 121. This is interesting. She's contradicting her own metaphor. So, or rather she's turning her metaphor into a simile in a way that contradicts it. So you know how earlier we were talking about her describing depression as a form of death? And like specifically saying after I died and things like that. Here, oh well, it's all right. This is my book. She has things like trying to avoid feeling this fallowness had nearly killed me. And I don't know if that's a reference to suicide or if it's like a shifting in that metaphor to simile way. And she says like emotional death here as well. This whole section. One 131 to 136. Yeah, she talks about the idea of depression kidnapping you, and like almost like when she talks about death, it's almost death of the person or death of the soul, and the idea that depression has ripped you from yourself. And so, yeah, that sense of isolation and loneliness there, but isolation and loneliness from yourself more than like from people in general. So what was I writing? Story of swimming pool. Yes. Doesn't want to get depressed, but is anyway, not meeting up with her own expectations, so hence the feeling of loneliness within herself. Yeah, I think a lot of perspective is about the need to submit to depression in order to allow it to pass, which is a common thing. It's present in like Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist approaches to trauma, especially, and certain kinds of mental illness, obviously not all of them, is the idea that you allow whatever those feelings are, or symptoms, as you would call them diagnostically, you allow them to be present and then allow them to go. And that's definitely something she's influenced by, because she talks earlier in the book about going to a Zen retreat, and that the turning point for her is where she's forced to be like alone with all of her thoughts and feelings, and to see the depth that they've gotten to. This is an amazing passage. I'm going to read you this. So this chapter is intended for people living with people with depression. The clinically depressed are universal party poopers. They have no energy, don't want to do anything. They see the downside of everything and, at best, are indifferent to the things that used to excite them. They don't want to get out of bed in the morning. They avoid washing, dressing, going out during the day, but they're wide awake when you're ready to retire. In short, they become a nightmare teenager, antisocial, unreliable, self-centered, touchy and inconsiderate, brimming with a drama which seems entirely unnecessary to the rest of the world. You begin to wonder why on earth you liked them in the first place. It's great. It's true. It's also horrible. Because that is one of the flip sides of the, like, truth present in depression, is that some of the things, not all of the things, but some of the things you think become real by nature of the, like, the effect of your illness on other people. No worries, Sahi. I hope you had a lovely sleep. Yeah, so I'm not going to quote this entire passage here because I'd have to write like the whole thing. Yeah. There's definitely a sense of resignation and exhaustion in here. I'll just put passage. Beginning. No story time today. What do you mean? I'm doing some reading today. I did start quite quickly. I suppose I didn't talk as much at the start of the stream. Right, also I need to stop this because the whole point of the timer was to take breaks. What are we doing for time? We're an hour in. This is pretty good. And I am on page 139, so I've got like 100 pages left, and we've done like 90 pages. What is my PhD about? I have a command for that. Oh. It just might take me 8 attempts to type it. But yeah, so I'm looking at illness narratives, which is to say any first-hand writing about the experience of living with illness, and I'm specifically looking at texts or forms that do so in a weird or different way, in order to better connect with the embodied experience of living with illness, which is to say what it feels like to really live with whatever the illness is. And I'm looking at mental illness in general. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I actually originally started looking just at anxiety characterized disorders, but I've expanded it because there's too much comorbidity in mental illness. which means people having multiple conditions. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like 60% of people that have depression also have an anxiety disorder of some kind. And part of the reason for that is a weakness in the way we categorize mental disorders. So if you present with half a dozen symptoms, you can go through the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Systems Manual, which is basically the categorization system that is used in the Western world for mental illness. And it's becoming increasingly disputed because you could take those 6 symptoms and apply them to probably a dozen different disorders. I think if you take the symptoms that I have, so I've been diagnosed with clinical depression and social anxiety disorder, but I would also qualify as having PTSD or even complex PTSD, or having quite a lot of the symptoms of OCD or loads of different things you can look at, and none of those things are correct, but none of them are also wrong. So it felt wrong when I was researching to look at anything other than all of mental illness, because when I was looking at anxiety characterized disorders, I ran into the problem that one of my original sources, which I won't be using now, possibly, I don't know. So one of my original sources is a book by John Green, who is a famous YouTuber, who has OCD, and he wrote his most recent book, The Protagonist Has OCD. And I wanted to use that as one of my primary sources, but at the time that I was writing my PhD proposal, the most recent DSM came out, wherein they moved OCD out of anxiety disorders and into its own classification. So, and this was all around the time where I was starting to read more about MAD studies, which is a branch of disability studies that specifically one of the main things it does is work to counter this idea of how we view and categorize mental illness. So I was starting to read more about that and understand the problems inherent in the system, and it was kind of all stuff I'd already seen, but hadn't quite been able to put words to. And I suddenly found that I couldn't use the DSM definition. I couldn't say anxiety disorders and include OCD, at which point I started to go, well, what is the point of using any of this categorization at all? Why am I doing this? And that's why I'm now looking at mental illness as a whole rather than any one kind of symptom or a thing like that. And really the thing that narrows, because it's important when you're doing a PhD to also consider your scope in terms of making sure your scope isn't too big. Like I can't look at everything ever written about mental illness, that would be unrealistic. But for me, the non-normative narrative form is what controls the scope, because I'm not looking at I'm sitting here with a memoir in front of me. This is an abnormal memoir, and I'm not looking, for the most part, I'm reading some traditional memoirs, but for contrast, rather than them being they'll be secondary sources, not primary sources. Can medical professionals self-diagnose their own mental health illnesses? It depends in what way you're asking. Not legally. If you wanted, and it depends on where you are in the system you're living in. So, for example, here in the UK, and I believe in the US as well, in order to get a lot of the support you would need for living with any kind of illness, you need to prove your diagnosis. And there's a lot of controversy, especially within the disability community, because it can be very hard to get a diagnosis, especially for certain people. For example, I wrote a paper on chronic pain in women last year, and I found that there's a really high And again, I don't have a head for memorizing numbers. So when I quote statistics, often I'll give you a ballpark and I won't be able to cite it precisely because I just don't remember things that clearly. But I found a statistic that I think something like a third of women who presented with chronic pain were referred for psychiatric treatment. There is a huge amount of misdiagnosis and it can be very hard to get a diagnosis. For example, my fibromyalgia diagnosis I got this year after 10 years of chronic pain. And it's even worse if you are a person of colour, especially if you're a woman of colour. You're much more likely to have any symptoms you present with dismissed or viewed as psychiatric problems rather than whatever they may actually be. So there is an issue with diagnosis and the reliance upon it. But generally, you have to be able to prove a diagnosis to get support in order to get... So I have disabled students allowance, which is much what it sounds like. It's support that we get here in the UK for studying as a disabled student. It's not necessarily monetary, although it can be. For me, what I get is I get weekly mentoring, which is someone who can help keep me on track and someone I have to talk to about my experiences. I've worked with my mentor for a year now. She's absolutely amazing, and I'm very glad I've got her for the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah, there is a huge... basically only very recently has it come to be understood that autism presents differently in women or people assigned female at birth, because they and I'm going to be a bit vague with this because I've done some courses on this, but it's I don't want to say anything incorrectly. My remembering / understanding is that generally in children, autism presents like loudly in male presenting children and quietly in female presenting children, so can often be misdiagnosed, that sort of thing. I actually, when I was a child, was sent to I mean quite young, so I think I was 6 or 7. I was sent to a psychologist because I was misbehaving in class, and they thought I might have some kind of learning difficulty. When it turned out I was bored and I'd already done all the work, I was put ahead a year instead. So yeah, I've lost my train of thought, but coming back to self-diagnosis, it's going to cause problems for you legally, self-diagnosing. I think most medical professionals would get an external diagnosis, but there is a strong movement in the disability community to support people who have self-diagnosed. I do know people who've self-diagnosed, and I do believe them and their stories. I know quite a lot of people who've self-diagnosed with PTSD, especially because they haven't necessarily felt comfortable going and seeking help for it, or they've sought help in a way that didn't require them to make any kind of proof like that. So I think it's important to acknowledge that people who self-diagnose, their experiences are just as valid. Now, obviously, there is a caveat to that, which is you need to be rigorous in making sure that it's the correct thing, like making sure that you've got the required information. But I genuinely believe that for most people who are seriously self-diagnosing, that they really have looked at all of that and done their research and know what they're talking about. So yeah, that's a general answer. Before I was diagnosed, what did the doctors answer about my muscle pain? Well, so I got, there's a lot of back pain, a history of back pain in my family. It's very much not uncommon. But a lot of the pain that my family have is, and yeah, I can talk a bit about my fibromyalgia. I'm very happy to. You're very welcome to ask me questions. I'll do it as part of this story. So all of the people in my family who actually also, let's just move over to here for a bit. The people in my family that have back pain, it's mostly mechanical for them. So things like injuries, slip discs, that sort of thing. So when I started getting back pain, it wasn't very surprising. And I just took painkillers for a while. And this was in my late teens, early 20s. This is the point where I was very severely mentally ill. Both of my suicide attempts occurred in those years. So amidst everything else, I didn't really notice how much pain I was in. When I started to go through treatment and therapy for my mental illness and started to be more able to be present in my body, which was something I struggled with before. I get a lot of dissociation and depersonalization. Once I got through that and started to realize how much pain I was in, I then went to see a doctor. I was given painkillers and told to come back in 6 months if it was still a problem, and the painkillers I was given weren't very intense. It was a very dismissive and invalidating experience, and it meant that I didn't go back to doctors as it got worse. I just tried to self-treat it as best as I could, but in a way that wasn't effective. At this point, I was starting also to get pain in my legs as well, and in my shoulders and my neck. Eventually, and this is now about 6 years ago, I'm 33 for context. So about 6 years ago, it got a lot worse again, to the point that I was waking up in the middle of the night, vomiting because I was in so much pain. I went to an osteopath and explained that what I wanted was, at this point I was realizing there was something seriously wrong, and I wanted to know what the fuck was going on. So she took my history and said something really interesting, which is, when she took my history, she said, I don't just want to know about the history of your pain, I want to know about the history of your life, your physical activity, the stuff you do, that sort of thing. What's your job? All that sort of thing. And she pointed out that all of my pain with my back started when I stopped dance lessons. Now, I did dance lessons from when I was 6 years old until I was 18. I did ballet, tap, and jazz. I'm actually a qualified tap dance teacher because I got to professional level. So I was doing it a lot. Like, I was doing 12 hours a week at least of dancing. And then I stopped. I just completely stopped because I went to a sixth form where I couldn't then go to my dance lessons anymore because they'd been where my high school was. And I grew up in the countryside, so everything was very far from each other. And she said, your pain started when you stopped that. I think you might be hypermobile. And it turns out she was correct. I'm not majorly hypermobile. So if you're not familiar, hypermobility is a spectrum. You can have a normal range of mobility, anything up to having like Ehlers-Danlos levels of hypermobile, where you can sneeze and dislocate things. I'm not that far up, but I'm far enough that it causes problems for my body. And what she basically said, and what we worked on, as well as working on dealing with the pain. So I had acupuncture and things like that, which helped. She did physical manipulation with me. But we also worked, that was when I started doing yoga and things to help increase the strength of my body, and Pilates and stuff like that. So that the idea being that the strength would then offset the flexibility in my body, so that I would be able to hold my body together and things wouldn't fall out of place. When she first looked at me, she discovered that one of my legs was longer than the other. Not because one of my legs is literally longer than the other, but because the hamstrings in one of my legs were so tight that it was holding the leg shorter. So every time I walked, it was causing me more pain. So at that point, I got that diagnosis and had that treatment. But then, so I had treatment for about a year, and it made a massive improvement. But then I moved and I stopped going. There's a lot of, and then I moved and I lost access to this treatment and I think that's a very common experience. And then in the past couple of years, 2 or 3 years, my pain has come back. I had a couple of times where I was also getting really severe fatigue. I was diagnosed with B12 deficiency and vitamin D deficiency at different times. I had a point where I couldn't get out of bed and I was really confused because when I was severely mentally ill, I couldn't get out of bed either. I was lying there going, I'm fine mentally, why can't I lift my body up? And it was really confusing because I'd worked so hard to get to the point mentally where I could do things again. And I've suddenly been finding I can't do things physically anymore. And it got worse and worse. But I didn't really do anything about it because I was scared to go back to a doctor and be dismissed again. I did eventually go back to a doctor and I did get, here's your painkillers, off you go. And so I stopped trying. And that's why I wrote the paper I did about chronic pain in women, is I wanted to know that my experience was not limited to me, and was I mean, I also didn't want to know that. I didn't want to know that there's a horrible sexism present and racism present in the medical system, which I'd realised at that point. But when you sit down and look at all the statistics of it, it's horrifying. But eventually, so this is like the start of 2018. It was getting bad again. So I went to the GP here, where we bought a house, and I re-signed with the GP, and I went relatively early on. And I got a doctor who listened to me and said, this is really horrible. I'm so sorry you're living with this much pain. I am going to give you painkillers, but I don't want you to not come back. I want you to make sure you come back to me in, I think it was a month or 6 weeks. I can't find anything wrong with you mechanically because I've never lost any flexibility or ability to move or things like that. And he was amazing. He was so, so good. And it was the first time, other than seeing that osteopath, that I'd really felt validated. And I took the painkillers, but it was getting worse. And through 2019, it continued to get worse, to the point that when I was commuting into university, when I started my master's degree, I couldn't walk very well. So I bought a walking stick. I don't have my walking stick in here at the moment. I've got a nice one now. The pain was now, and over those years, I started to get the pain in my hands to the point that I couldn't use them. The pain in my joints was getting worse. I don't have headaches or anything like that. Headaches are the one kind of pain I don't tend to get with fibro. I get whole body aches. I get really intense pain in my joints and my muscles. When the pain is in my hands, it's very often like in my fingers, and where you can feel. So if you've ever looked at a diagram of the muscles and the ligaments and stuff in your fingers, you know how these fingers are connected. And I'm holding my little finger and my ring finger for those who are just listening. I can feel that connection when it's painful. And yeah, it was getting worse in my legs, my ankles, my feet. And I thought it was me being a wimp. For years, so I do live action role playing, which I've talked about before because I did my dissertation was on role playing, but I did quite combat heavy stuff. So I would be running around a field and fighting people and getting frustrated with myself because no one else was in the amount of pain I was in. How long the pain lasts, my pain is constant. I am always in pain. Right now, my left shoulder is really hurting. My legs are really aching and my hips are aching. In my hands, it comes and goes. Generally, it's if I overuse them, that they will then be really painful for a couple of days. I deal with it by not using them, and then it will settle down again. So obviously at this point I knew something very seriously was wrong. I went back to my doctor. They started doing more investigation into what it could be. I saw an osteopath as well. The osteopath it felt dismissive to me at the time. The osteopath said that my pain was stress-induced. It turned out he was correct because fibromyalgia is exacerbated by stress. But it wasn't what I wanted to hear at that point. And I found that really hard, and I felt like it was my fault that I was in pain. And because at that point I'd started my master's degree, I'd started a job. There was a lot going on. I was very stressed. And eventually I went back to my GP again and said, hey, it's just getting worse. I can't walk some of the time now. And they referred me to the hospital. And that took several months to go through because NHS waiting times are quite long. I did consider going private at some point. I do have the financial ability to go private. But in the end I didn't. And it was in August last year that I ended up at a rheumatology consultant because the GP they'd run all sorts of blood tests. They decided not to do imaging in the end because I have no mechanical problems, and they said it wouldn't be helpful. And the GP had said, "Do you know what fibromyalgia is? Because we think it might be that." And I was like, I just spent 3 months researching a paper on chronic pain. I know what fibromyalgia is. So by the time I went to the rheumatologist and she said, yeah, I think it's definitely this. So fibro is diagnosed slightly by exclusion. It's ruling out other things. I'd been tested for like arthritic markers and all of that sort of thing. My inflammation markers are normal. I didn't have any other signs of autoimmune stuff, and that sort of thing. And she said, yeah, I do think it's this. I've got several, so in fibromyalgia there are tender points on your body and there's like a dozen of them, and they're sort of like here and here, and then they're in either side of your lower back and on the sides of your hips, and at points the tender points in my lower back and hips are so painful that I can't lie on them, sit on them, that sort of thing. And yeah, so that's been, and the rheumatologist referred me on to the chronic pain team, who I'm finally seeing this week because again everything's really slow. And the pain is still really bad. So Shay has asked, from where do you get the will to live and just move on forward in life? That's a really good question. And some days I don't know. There are days where I don't feel like I can move on. There are days where I don't have a lot of will to live. I don't think you can summon willpower out of nothing. And I genuinely believe that you have to be ready to move forward with things. You have to be ready to push on. And a lot of that, especially with mental illness, it happens without you noticing. You'll process things in the background and you won't have realised that you're ready to do something until you've done it. I think in the past year especially, having this happen alongside a pandemic, alongside losing one of the most important members of my family, basically the head of my family, and not being able to be there with my family through that. So as I was at home in more and more pain, my granddad was dying, and I couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't be there. And I think what I've learned in the past year is I've got no fucking clue where I get the will to live. I don't know where I get the will to push on. I think it's that somewhere deep down I believe that actually the world is quite a cool place and I quite like being here. I have a lot of people around me that I love very deeply. And hang on, I'm going to hug my llama. I need to hug my llama. Thank you, Shay. Yeah, I have a lot of really good things in my life. I am very privileged financially and in security and in the fact that I have a safe and stable marriage and a wonderful family and a cat that likes to hate me, and I have a lot of really good things in this world. And I can't see that every day. There are days where I can't see that, especially on days where I'm in a lot of pain and then my brain weasels gang up on me. If you're new, brain weasels is what I call my intrusive thoughts. Yeah, there's days where I don't know how to continue. But then there's days where I get up and I'm excited. And there's days where I feel I can sit here even though I'm in pain. I'm on lots of different medications that are helping. I'm having therapy regularly. I have my mentoring, which is, it's not therapy, but it's not too dissimilar to it either. We're not working on a therapeutic kind of thing, but it definitely has a similar effect. My mentor has fibromyalgia. When I got diagnosed, she was not surprised. She went, I've been listening to you talk about your experience for a year, and I've known for a long time that you have fibro, but I haven't felt able to say. And yeah, I have an incredible support network. I have a wonderful family. I have two wonderful families because I have my husband's family as well, who have always been fantastic. Oh, Shay, I'm so sorry. I got to go to the funeral. Only immediate family. So it was my aunts and uncles and cousins and my mum and my brothers and I were able to go. There was only like a dozen of us or so. We were just under the limit for the number of people that could go, but we couldn't go near each other. There was a moment where so I have an aunt who's a nurse, and she's a nurse in intensive care, so she's retired now, but she spent all of last year working with people dying of COVID, and by complete luck she had 2 weeks off before the funeral, which meant she'd been away from positive people long enough that she could come. It was safe. And she didn't want to go near anyone. She said, I can't do it. I can't put you at risk like that. And Gran insisted on hugging her anyway. Which is dangerous. I'm going to put that out there. It was dangerous, but it's going to make me cry now as well. And I'm really glad I was able to go. I did hug my gran. I had a mask and gloves on. And I used so much hand sanitizer that day, I can't tell you. It's been a really hard year. My gran is amazing. My gran is incredible, and I'm so proud of her. It was like yeah, I know. I'm not afraid of crying. I've cried on here before. 2 months after Granddad died, it was their 60th wedding anniversary. And I don't know how she's gone through all of it. But she has, and I'm really proud of her. I'm gonna blow my nose, so I'm just gonna mute for a second. Why did I get so bright? I don't know what's happened. Thank you, Shay. And I think, thank you all for asking questions about this, because it is, I think, really often when people are talking about working in academia, it's very focused on the work. Everyone who's an academic, who's a student, who's a researcher, who's a lecturer, whatever it may be, they're all people who are going through, right now, really horrible things. And I'm not afraid of showing that it's difficult. I'm not ashamed of showing that it's difficult. I think it's really important to. I'm so sorry, Shay. I mean, I'm glad that your family were able to go for their sake. I hope that, yeah, and I hope that when this is all over, and by this I mean the pandemic, not like the world as we know it, I really hope that you're able to find a way to go and honour them in a way that gives you what attending a funeral would have done. I have plans for what I want to do. I've got a kind of pilgrimage I want to go on. My granddad was a Church of England vicar. So I want to go and go to the churches that he worked in, that I used to visit growing up, and go, I guess, see him there, as it were. Oh, okay. That's just an even harder year for you. I'm so sorry. I'm very tired of saying that I'm so sorry to people, as well. I've also realised that with the whatever the fuck that lighting change was, my camera is attempting to remove parts of my face. Give me just a second and I'll sort that out. It's gonna look weird for a second. There we go, that's better. But yeah, we have to talk about all of these things, because there are days like yesterday when I was trying to read and I had to stop because I got hit by so much grief out of nowhere. There are days where I can't use my hands to write notes with. So I feel like I can't do the reading at all. There are days where I can't sit up. And all of the things that you're taught as a PhD student when you're looking at going to do a PhD, obviously I've not started yet, but all of the advice you're given and the things that you're told is all about making sure you have a regular schedule. And this has especially been talked about in the past year with a lot of people working from home. And you get things like, make sure you keep this regular schedule, make sure you're sleeping at the same time every day, make sure you're doing this and that. And those things aren't all accessible to me. I can't do them because then it isn't the same every day. Oh no. Oh, I've had a couple of colds this past year and it's just been really scary. Like even aside from it causing things like that, that really sucks. Half of my arm is gone. Yeah, no, I've tried several times to have a regular schedule and I do see that it can help me. There are ways in which it's good, there are ways in which it helps. But what will always happen is that I'll have a few days of adhering to that schedule, and then I'll have a day where I can't continue despite the pain or despite my brain weasels or whatever it may be. And suddenly that schedule's gone out the window, which is why what I'm doing now, what I've started doing this week and what is working is that I'm just showing up when I can and when I feel able to, and I'm really surprising myself by the amount I'm able to show up. And you know what? It might take me an extra year or two to do my PhD, but I can still do it. I am able to do this. I am capable of doing this. And I think it's pretty cool that I'm even trying, to be honest, because, you know, a few years ago I didn't think I was capable of anything. So I'm really proud of myself. And I find that very hard to say, but I am. And thank you all for being here with me as I'm going through trying to do that. It's really important to me to share this experience. I am stronger than I think, yeah, exactly. But I also don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay that sometimes I'm not strong. It's okay that sometimes I need to rest. And it's much, much easier to say these things than it is to act on them. It's very easy to sit here and say these things, and it's much harder to internalize it. But I get anxious about doing this sometimes and about streaming this, but I'm so glad that I'm doing it. I'm so glad that I am. And I'm probably gonna have to stop in a few minutes because I'm now finding that I'm so emotional that it's making it hard to be here again. But it's lovely to be able to acknowledge that alongside the happiness that I'm here and able to do this. And we read nearly 100 pages of book today, and I got it set up so that I can read with you all. And we've had lovely discussions, and it's been so nice. I had a similar situation where I had to choose between dropping med school or keep it going because of the illness you had. Yeah, so my bachelor's degree I did when I was really severely ill, as if I'm not now. I've got to stop saying that because it's a ridiculous contrast. I don't know how the fuck I passed. I got a 2-2, which if you're not familiar with the British degree system at bachelor level, is that first is the best, 2-1 is the second best, 2-2 is the third best. Then some universities do third and some just do fail. I got a 2-2, which was the lowest mark for my university, I believe. And I just didn't turn up to a whole bunch of my exams. I didn't hand in some assignments. I very rarely went to classes. Like, I don't know how I got anything from there. I kind of wonder even now what would have happened if I had stopped. I never considered stopping. Yeah, I also carried on and I got that degree, but I really don't feel like I got anything out of it, which is why I'm so glad that even with all of this pain and with this whole new illness, that I've been able in the past year with my master's, and I'm able to with this PhD, to finally get that experience that I always wanted and that I knew was there. I'm the first person in my family to get a degree. My family's not historically super well off or super educated, and we weren't poor, but we weren't well off. We were in that sort of, if anything goes wrong, there'll be a problem sort of level of income. And now, as of next week, I'm doing a PhD. One of my brothers is doing a master's degree, and the other one is doing a bachelor's degree. How cool is that? 2 of my cousins are doing bachelor's degrees right now as well. We've gone from no one being able to access this level of education to all of us doing it. 3 of my cousins are actually on bachelor's courses now, and that's really cool to me. And it's the thing I've always wanted to do, but for a very long time I didn't think it was possible. So it is amazing that I am here and I am able to acknowledge that. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna say thank you again, all of you, for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking for my story, and thank you for bearing witness to it. I want you all to know that I'm honoured that you would bring your stories here and share things with me as well. I'm always happy to talk about it, whether that's a little bit or a lot, whatever it might be, because people's stories about being ill is the very thing that I'm looking at. So don't ever feel that you're being a distraction. All of the discussions I'm having here help me. They help make me better as a researcher. I really believe that. So thank you also very much for coming and being here and for your support. I cry again. It means the world. I love you all very much, and I will see you again tomorrow. I will punch my microphone. I'm trying to wave. Goodbye, guys.